Hello, everybody, and welcome to Of Dice and Pen Episode 3, and today we are going to be talking about tabletop RPGs, something near and dear to my heart. With me today is going to be the ever-plucky and I want to say bright and sunny, Matthew Rossi.
So you want to lie is what we're going with. I want to say bright and sunny because I'm a horrible liar.
I gotta give people hope. Whether it's fake hope, I gotta give them hope. Who was unfortunately just had his world shattered, and my friend the Loremaster Tim.
Heyo.
And so we're gonna be talking about something that I think all of us are really happy with. So me and myself, I've been playing tabletop RPGs for about 16 years, give or take, not including. Yes, I'm a youngin', not including the brief interludes I've had with it when I was younger than that, sitting on my father's knee. But yeah, I've played everything from the original Dungeons and Dragons through Tales of the Floating Vagabond, up to my most recently favorite of Savage Worlds. How about you?
Yay for Savage Worlds.
Yay for Savage Worlds. How about yourself, Matt?
Oh God, the first one I actually chronologically, the first RPG I ever saw was the old Errol Otis cover purple box Dungeons and Dragons basic set. The second edition of it, which I don't know if you guys remember. They used to be in comic books. They would have the ads for it. They would have like little cartoon, we're going in an adventure. Oh no, it's a green slime. Seriously, that's when I remember seeing that and telling my mom, oh, my friends at school have this and I don't have it. And so my mom went out and got me something that wasn't D&D at all, but it had dragons in it. It wasn't a game at all. And so I tried showing that to them. They're like, no, that ain't it, man. So I had to go back and see, no, it actually has to say Dungeons and Dragons on it. They didn't, I lived in Rhode Island. You couldn't get it. There was one game shop in Rhode Island, and I don't even know when it opened. So she actually had to go to Massachusetts to get me this thing, which wasn't that hard. Rhode Island's the size of a postage stamp. You can walk to Massachusetts, but she had to go up and get it for me at a place in Waltham, because there was a comics, cards, anime type store and gaming store in Waltham that had all this stuff. Because for some reason, anime was really big in Boston on Channel 25. There was a show called Fox Force 5, which has nothing to do with anything, but that show was big, so they had the anime stuff and they had game stuff. So that's the first thing I ever had, and I remember it because it was the cover was weird, and Errol Otis liked to draw boobs. He really liked to draw boobs, so my mom was looking at this I don't know. I'm please, Mom. And that would have been 1980.
Oh, wow.
1980, 1981. So we're talking a good 30 plus years.
Man, I wasn't even born yet.
Yeah. So I was about 10. So, we've just discovered I'm ancient, but hey, everybody knew that already.
And that's okay. I'm right behind you.
Yeah.
So what about you, Tim?
So I started gaming at about 1983. So, like I said, I'm right behind you. We started playing. I was part of that first big wave in the early '80s, where there was a lot of gamers were just starting to come into it. There was a lot of role players who were just getting involved, and it was really big in my school for some reason. And I went to a small Catholic school, and we had a class of about 25 kids, and every single boy in the class would play D&D, and we'd play it on lunch breaks. And I was really interested in mythology. I was really interested in monsters and legends and that sort of thing. So it was custom made for me. So I've been playing basically ever since with various different groups. I started with D&D. We moved on eventually to Star Frontiers. Was always a big hit. The Marvel Superheroes game.
Yeah. I remember that one.
Oh yeah.
I remember that one because of the face rip system.
Oh yeah, Phase Rip was a great system.
No, they just called it that because if you looked, it was fighting, agility, strength, endurance, reason, intuition, and
Psyche.
Yeah.
Yep.
And for some reason, if you just say that out loud, it's Face Rip. Yep. So they called it the Face Rip system. They didn't care.
So we played that for a bunch. We played a little bit of Palladium. Played a whole bunch of board games at the time too. And eventually, I went on and found my next big favorite game, which was Call of Cthulhu. And I ran Call of Cthulhu for a long time. I was a big fan of it. Also ran a bunch of other small press games. I've run pretty much everything at one point or another, up until about 2003, which is when Savage Worlds came out. And I pretty much fell in love with that system and run that almost exclusively. Although I've been known to dip my toes in a few other games along the way. I'll pretty much play anything, but I only choose to run the games that I really love, and Savage Worlds happens to be one of them.
Yeah, D&D was the one that kind of kickstarted my love of RPGs. It was the first game I ever had, and I remember I was going to this little shop up on Main Street. It was Outland at the time, and I know Tim knows that one. But it wasn't. It was right by the university. There was a bunch of college kids, and I remember the dude that was running this game. I remember I thought he was the coolest guy in the world because I was 12 years old, and he was a bounty hunter. And I thought it was a cool thing. Like, that is just, he was a real life bounty hunter. So he ran this awesome, weird campaign with all sorts of wackiness, and it kind of got me hooked. And then I started playing games like Tales of the Floating Vagabond just because it was weird and it was there and it was something that's cool to try. Call of Cthulhu was my other favorite one just because I loved the percentile system back in the day. But I also always loved the idea of, my character going insane because of random decisions that I make. I thought it was always fun. I was also really big into the World of Darkness stuff for a while, which I feel is like a normal rite of passage for teenage boys at some point, or just teenagers in general. But I was into Changeling and Mage more than anything else, which were very abnormal for most people, because most people are like, oh, vampires and werewolves, yeah! I was like, I could be a fairy? Sweet.
Yeah, I actually played all of them, because back when they came out when I was in college, I remember getting the original vampire that was obviously made on somebody's Macintosh. Yes. Like, you looked at it, it was seriously obviously made. Like, I remember saying to myself, I could make this. But I remember I played that for a bit, but I really think Werewolf was my game back then, because the group I was in didn't really like White Wolf's tendency to come up with systems where you can't actually win. Like, White Wolf has this thing where, if you're a vampire and you must balance your humanity in the Camarilla versus the Seven. Werewolf is like, you're fighting a war, but you're not going to win. The worm's going to win, and you're going to die. And Mage, especially with Paradox. Mage with Paradox is when White Wolf hit their absolute screw with you mechanic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was just, we were like, no, we want to actually beat the technocracy and destroy the world and remake it. We want to actually see this stuff happen. That's why when they came out with Exalted, I was so thrilled, because that's, to my mind, Exalted is the best thing they ever did.
That's another game that I played briefly, sadly only briefly, because there's only one person willing to run it in my area.
Oh, yeah, it does get kind of complicated to run.
Yeah. But that's where I rolled a 74?
Honestly, yeah, it's funny because to me the best system they ever did was Aberrant, their superhero game, which I didn't like the setting all that much, and that's a problem. I want to talk about that at some point, because there's settings where the settings are good and the system isn't all that great.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes the system is good but the setting isn't that great.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, you guys mentioned Savage Worlds, so I know you know Pinnacle.
Yes.
Originally, Pinnacle did a game called Brave New World, which eventually went over to other system. I forget who took it. I think it was NEG, but Brave New World was fun because it was a superhero game, and it had a great setting. Like, the setting's amazing, but the rules were incredibly limiting. Like, you had to play the exact same kind of superhero. Like, everybody had, it broke down into almost character classes. Like, you're a fire shooter, or you're a tank type, and it was just very limited. But I think it's funny because, it wasn't the same system as, say, Deadlands, which is my introduction to what you're saying the Savage World system, which is basically like Deadlands, but broadened and shaped out.
Right. Well, it really is more of a kind of a stripped down version of the core Deadlands system. So if you're familiar with Deadlands, after the RPG had been out for a while, they did a miniatures game called the Great Rail Wars. And in it, they had a more pared down system where all the character stats were based on individual die levels. So the die type went from D4 through D12. The higher your die type, the better you were. And that's what they used as the basis system for Savage Worlds, because they wanted to make a simple, easy-to-use role-playing system. And so they based it on the Great Rail Wars rules. So it's sort of like the spiritual precursor to it. But kind of going back to one of the things you were saying before, I thought it was funny that you said that you had a really hard time finding books back in the 80s when you were first starting out. Because one of the things I remember, one of my clearest memories, is that we used to be able to get D&D books from Kmart. Every local Kmart had them in the toy aisle.
I remember that.
There was a stack of monster manuals and other books you get right directly from the Kmart. That was how big role-playing games were in that early part of the 80s. And that was when I was just getting into it. It was just when I was getting started.
I wonder if that's because, if it depends, it might be a local thing, because
it may have been.
In Rhode Island, Kmart was barely even there. Like, there are a couple, but it was like, I remember going to Ann and Hope, which is a chain that's only big in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. It's nowhere else.
Yeah.
Ann and Hope had D&D books, but they had them in the music section.
Yeah.
and that was like later.
Huh.
It was really weird. I'm kind of giving a shout out, but I don't even know if the store still exists. But in the like late '80s and early '90s, my gaming hookup was a store in the arcade, which is this place in Providence. It's like one of the oldest malls in the United States. And they had a game shop. That was that's when I started getting like, oh my god, I must spend every waking like cent money I have either wasting it on comic books or this. And that was pretty much when I really got into like some of the weirder stuff. You mentioned Call of Cthulhu. I was into Superworld.
Oh yeah.
And Stormbringer, which was the same system, but
Yes.
And I wasn't all into the Pendragon game, but I knew about it, which was also Chaosium. Chaosium was like, for a long time, Chaosium was the alternative.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
If you didn't want to play D&D, you went over to Chaosium and you were like, okay, let's try Call of Cthulhu for a while. Well, we're all dead. Okay. Well, no, Jim's still alive. Yes, I'm still alive. Still alive, and I'm going to eat you to make sure I stay alive. Jim, you're not actually insane. Well, I'm playing.
Well, funny thing about Chaosium stuff too is one of the guys that used to run Cthulhu here locally, Dan Harms, was actually a writer for. See, Tim knows him, but he was a writer for Chaosium for a number of years. So a lot of the weirder shit that they published wound up getting play tested on us when I was a kid. It was hilarious.
Yep. That was one of the nice things that back when UBCon was interested in gaming, they actually one year they had 5 different writers from Chaosium show up, all in the same weekend, and I got to hang out and play a game with all of them. It was fantastic. There was Mike Barrent, there was Dan Harms was there was Scott David Anielowski, a whole bunch of those guys were playing right here. It was a really good time.
I definitely enjoy our proximity as to the Canadian border, and then as a result the amount of people that we have show up for stuff like that here.
Exactly.
So now we've established that we all know a ton of different game systems at this point, and we all have our favorites. So what do you use to decide if you want to even invest or look into a new system? Because I know that we've had a couple games come out recently, like the Star Wars RPG we even toyed around with for a little bit, the new one. What do you look for in a system, like in a current release?
Well, the first thing I usually look for is I want to give it a shot first. I want to play it out a little bit before I have a chance to buy it. I mean, I'm an older gentleman. I'm a more mature gamer, meaning I'm an old fart, and so I don't have a whole lot of money to throw around. So if I'm gonna invest in something, it's got to be worth my investment. So what I want to do is I want to make sure I have a chance to take it out and give it a test drive. Either play it at a convention, or hang out with somebody who's got a copy of the game and wants to run it. So, sit down at a local game store and try it out for a little bit, or look for freebies. A lot of companies are now doing test drive type rules and short gimmies that you can get. You can for all sorts of systems. Take a look and see if it appeals to you. See if it makes sense. And if it does, what I'm also looking for is something that takes very low amount of time to prep. I don't have all the time in the world to sit and stat out 50th level D&D characters anymore as opposition. There's just no time for that. It's got to be something I can pick up and run. It's got to be something I can pick up and just play with, and it won't take more than an hour or two of my time to get up and running. So that's why I'm looking more at some of the more rules light systems. Savage Worlds is still a fairly crunchy system, but it's rules lean. Stuff like that. Also looking at stuff like Gumshoe or systems like that where it's less prep and less game prep and less rules you have to finagle with, and more action that happens at the table.
Matt, what about yourself?
I was actually thinking about it. One of the things I admit is that I'm a bit of a presentation snob, and if a game doesn't look good to read, like if I can't pick this thing up and read it, here's an example: the original Iron Kingdom's rules when they put out
God, yeah.
It was so painful to look at that. That page was gray with gray text. Like slightly darker gray text. I'm like looking at this going, my eyes are literally bleeding out of my fucking face. Mm-hmm. And then when they put out when they decided, we're not going to do D20, we're going to do our own rule system, they came out with a beautiful color book, which is so much easier to read. I picked that thing up.
Gorgeous thing. Oh my God, I think it's gigantic and it's beautiful.
I picked that thing up, not even caring if I ever got to run it, just so I could read it and look at it and cannibalize it for ideas. So I do like that. I like games where the presentation is good. What you said about rules light is important because, like you, I'm getting old. It comes down to do I have time to learn this? One of the big stumbling blocks I had with D&D 5th edition as much as I think 5th edition is really elegant for especially for D&D, is that I'm not familiar enough with it to play it out of the box, so to speak. I mean, obviously out of the book. Whereas I can sit down and I can run Pathfinder. Boom, I know Pathfinder. It's the same rules as we've had before, so that kind of keeps me in the Pathfinder groove. Even though I think they did an amazing job with 5th edition, and I'd like to play it, but I can't run it. You know what I mean? Like I could run it, but it would take me long. It will take me longer.
You could. I mean, we've played some 5th edition for a little while, and the only reason we stopped had nothing to do with the game itself. It was just a taste thing that was going on. It's really easy to pick up and run. It's really simple. Almost everything boils down to whether they should have advantage or disadvantage.
It actually feels. You know what? To be honest, you know what it feels like. Did you guys see Mutants and Masterminds when it came out?
Oh yeah, I actually have a copy sitting in my other room.
When the original Mutants and Masterminds came out, it was kind of similar in that it boiled things down a lot more to how does this affect a D20 roll,
right?
And I felt that when I was first looking at it that it had kind of the akin to that. So yeah, I get what you're saying. It's just it's a case of where I have Pathfinder. Pathfinder is actually harder to run.
Yeah,
but you're more familiar with it.
I know 3rd edition.
Right.
I know I can run the grapple rules off the top of my head. Which is like, I think, quite frankly, that should be a life award.
And speaking about sanity checks.
Yeah, I work those things out. But I mean, it's like, I'm looking at my bookshelf right now, and I have a game called Silver Age Sentinels. You guys ever see that one?
Yes.
That's the Tri-Stat system. The Tri-Stat system is one of those things where I feel really bad that it didn't take off more than it did.
It had so much potential because it was so easy.
Yeah, so easy to run. That was like, I picked that up, just like, I remember getting it like 10 years ago now, maybe more. I remember getting it entirely just because, I picked it up, flipped through it, and said, the presentation is not bad, and oh my god, this is easy to run. Mm-hmm. It's like 3 systems. This is almost as easy as the West End D6 system, which was the old Star Wars game.
Yep.
Which was nothing. That was a great system. Then again, I'm the kind of guy that liked Torg. You guys remember Torg?
Torg was. I have a copy of Torg. I just happened to score a copy not too long ago.
Oh yeah, we were talking about that.
Oh yes, yeah, it's my favorites.
I liked games like Torg. If your game system is like weird or unusual in some way, that'll probably attract my attention. Like I've got, I don't know if you guys like Monty Cook games. I've got Numenera and The Strange, and I like The Strange better than Numenera. I think Numenera tries too hard a little bit.
Yeah,
The Strange gives me old like Torg memories or Nexus: The Infinite City memories where you can just do anything you want with it.
Yeah,
I like that. Sometimes I'll be a little afraid to pick up a system if I feel like it's a little too narrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the thing that bugged me about Numenera is I have the core book and I tried reading through it, but it just felt like there was a lot of stuff that was being over-explained. Like he was repeating the same thing 3 or 4 times in the same paragraph in the same section, and it got really tedious to read. And I couldn't get through it.
Yeah, I can see that because it feels like the game's a little too worried that it's too weird for people.
Yeah, and it's not really. It's not all that odd.
But for gamers, I mean, that's the problem. Is like I don't know how to put this, but it's like the thing about gaming is it tends to get you really flexible in terms of what you'll accept because you have no idea what that person's going to throw at you.
Oh yeah.
Right.
You were talking about Call of Cthulhu, and I remember the first Call of Cthulhu game I ever played. The guy who was running it was kind of weird, which I guess explains a lot about me and my life. But he pulled out the there's a I don't even remember what module this is from, but Chaosium used to put out the white book modules, like the large white books. And this one module is basically the color out of space, but set in the 80s from a space shuttle crash in Iowa.
Right.
And we're going in, and the NASA's trying to investigate it, and they keep getting, messed up because, Lovecraftian horrible, the color out of space is destroying them. And I remember going through it, and at some point, there's a rock and roll band that worships Nyarlathotep that comes through. I said, what do they have to do with any of this? It's like, nothing. They're just here.
They're just here.
Wait, that's a whole different scenario. I think he might have missed some pages.
No, he put them in. He put them in deliberately to make them show up later. It was one of those, later on they'd be in a different adventure. But it was just like,
okay,
we're going to the concert suddenly, and it was just like, what in the hell?
Like a precursor in a TV episode. Like you just see that background character.
Yeah. It was actually the thing about Chaosium is that, honestly, I didn't really like Call of Cthulhu that much as a game, but their modules were astonishing.
Yeah, that was one of the things that was always fantastic about it. The amount of research that they did for these books was phenomenal. The
Yeah.
detail they went into, the background details you could pick up from them, they were great. There were a couple of like some of the mega modules like Master and Tabletop has a couple of references in it to actual historical people that until I read the book I had no idea. I had no knowledge of them at all, and I was like, why are they making such a big deal about this guy? And then I go and look him up on Wikipedia, and so I suddenly discover, holy crap! So he was the leader of a revolution 20 years later.
That's like, I mean, I don't know if you guys, I mean, obviously you've heard of Ken Hite. I mean, there's no reason, one of the things that I think it was him who did this. He put a character named James Otis into a thing once, and James Otis is actually really important to America. Like, he's one of the original patriots.
Right.
He's the one who came up with the concept of no taxation without representation. That was him.
Okay.
And he was killed by lightning in 1783. Lightning killed him. Just
Whoa.
out of the blue, he got hit by lightning and killed. After having a nervous breakdown.
Okay, then.
He had some kind of complete nervous breakdown and started, even John Adams was like, hey, he used to be great, but now he's kind of crazy. I'm like, the dude is made to be a Lovecraftian character. He should be in a Lovecraft story.
It should be in all the Lovecraft stories.
That like hits it hits all the marks for it too.
Yeah, goes nuts, gets hit by lightning. I mean, but it's stuff like that. I mean, I also don't want to keep talking about this because we probably have more to talk about. But one of the things I remember when I got the first Shadowrun book, and it was that blue cover with like the weird Pacific Northwest style art.
Yep.
And that's what grabbed me. Like, art will sometimes grab me when nothing else can. Like, the cover was interesting, and that's when I picked it up. And I remember buying it and taking it home. And it had that really weird art all the way through the inside. It was Lobenstein, I think, doing the art inside. And I remember thinking, years from now when I'm complaining about dice pools, this will be the game I'm complaining about. But I'm gonna play it anyway.
See, and for me, like, I'm with you guys, right? Like, its presentation is a big thing, ease of use is a big thing. One of the things I'm really enjoying now is a lot of the game companies that are doing those small, like, introductory boxes. Iron Kingdoms now does it, where you can get a brief starter set that either comes with minis or doesn't come with minis, comes with the rules, a streamlined rule book, and pre-gen characters, as well as rules to continue on past it. D&D did it with their presentation, their starter set. Things like that are also really keen to me. Like, I have a lot of weird box sets on my shelf. Like, I have the Dragon Age box set. The game was horrible regardless, but the box set was cool and it caught me.
Horrible is such a that's an overextension.
Yeah, I didn't care for it.
Okay,
but yeah, I like when they do stuff like that too, because then it also makes it easier to present it to new players as well. Like the 5th edition starter box set was one of those cool things where Tim brought it over to us, and it was like, okay, well, this is a great introduction to it. And then I brought it over to my current group that I'm running 5th edition for, and it was a great introduction for them. Like, it's a real good way to ease people into rules too, especially if they're familiar with the system, quote unquote, and there's new things to learn. It's a great way to do it. It's something I'd like to see other companies start to do more often. And I don't know, like, that's something I look forward to.
Well, the downside with doing the box sets is simply expense, just because it costs a lot more to produce something of that quality and that size.
Sure.
And most game companies just simply don't have the budget for it. Where I think we see an advantage though now is because of the prevalence of desktop publishing and electronic publishing, is that you see a lot of the stuff come out in PDF form. Is that you can go to the website and download a PDF that here's all the basic rules, and here's all you need to know to get started playing, and here's a free scenario to give you a shot. Here's some starter characters that'll work with that, and then you can just download it, try it out, give it a shot, and then if you like it, you can go back and buy more.
And that's a good point too.
Yeah, I have a ridiculous amount of PDFs on my iPad.
Oh, just tell me about it.
Same here, and I just downloaded the Shadowrun 5th edition and Shadowrun Run Faster because I'm going to be starting to run a Shadowrun game because. Well, yeah.
The largest folder on my hard drive is Steam, but the second largest folder is PDFs.
Yep.
Closely followed by MP3s, but we're not going to talk about those. But anyway, so definitely. I mean, take a look around if you're interested in a game. Check out the website. You never know what you're going to find.
And you do make a good point. A lot of companies are doing that, not just for tabletop RPGs, but all game companies are starting to do that if they have any sort of like rules at any point. A recent miniature game I'm getting into, Infinity, which has tons of RPG potential. They offer their rules for free online, and we're talking like 365 pages of rules for free. So, yeah. So now that we've established what draws you in, is there anything that you gravitate towards genre wise? Like me personally, I tend to be very steampunkish, at least as far as like, and I feel almost dirty saying it now, but I like that idea of technology and arcane wonder existing in the same sort of universe, and I tend to gravitate towards games that kind of incorporate that in some way.
Well, I mean, like we mentioned Shadowrun, that's definitely something that happens in there.
Oh yeah.
One of my favorite games of all time, and it's a game that doesn't get talked about very much, is Nexus: The Infinite City. It's sort of a precursor to Feng Shui, which Feng Shui is the one that got popular, and you know that's because it had people like Robin Laws working on it. But Nexus is this plucky little game where they tried to take the basic concept of infinite universes where anything can happen and ground it in, like, you know, you're in this city and the city is everywhere. You can go between realities just in this city. And one of the reasons that's actually really stuck with me, because I'm looking at stuff I've like mentioned tonight, like Torg, talking about The Strange. They're all like games where they play around with setting and they play around with genre and they play around with, like, you know, you can do anything. I think one of the reasons I like Exalted is because it finally decided to give you the freedom to like pilot a gigantic robot in battle against, you know, magical werewolf people from beyond the, you know, dreamland. Stuff like that. And the other thing is really, I mean, since he mentioned Marvel superheroes, I'll say this: Champions has been like practically like a member of my family for the past 20 years, 30 years. Oh my God! Like, I've been, yeah. I from the moment there was an, I don't know if you guys remember this, but like Hero System did like a rule book for Champions back in the 80s, and they got George Perez to do the cover.
Yep.
I remember seeing that, and I'm like, George freaking Perez did the cover of this. I must buy it, even though it is like 600 pages.
Yes. I have a copy of that somewhere. That's actually on my game list of shame. I've never played Champions.
I
own it. I've owned several versions of it. I have never had an opportunity to play it or run it.
Champions is one of those games where I have played it, and in the hands of the right kind of DM, it can be really fun. But Champions is one of those games where if you get the wrong kind of player,
yeah,
they can make your life miserable, because it's just the rules are pretty elaborate. And I remember going to like the guy I was like, when I was in college, the guy I was playing games with, I went and said, okay, I'm gonna make this character in Champions. He's like, let me do it. Let me make your character for you.
Oh, that's a bad sign.
He goes off and he does it. He comes back and he's like, so what I did was, and then after 20 minutes of him explaining what he did, he had used the game systems to give me literally, like, I had enough robot suits. I was essentially Tony Stark times 100. I had, like, you know, like secret bases and robot suits. Like, you spent all my points on stuff like, you know, bases and followers and stuff. And he's like, yeah, but it works out because now you have like these 20 suits. And I'm like, oh my God, you're a monster. I mean, I played the character because I'm not stupid.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, you don't
do all that work. I mean, you know, that'd be terrible. Just let it go. I mean, come on.
I mean, I'm not a fool, but my God, I'm never letting you in one of my campaigns without checking what you do.
So then, what of all time, what would you say is your favorite campaign or setting that you've participated in?
Oh man, that's hard.
I know.
Actually, I'm gonna have to go with my very first Advanced Dungeons and Dragons game, because it was kind of weird and kind of fun, and we were all just learning what we were doing. I'll tell this story. I've told it before. It's not a new story, but this is the game where I had the character whose biggest thing was. Do you remember the Ralph Bakshi movie Fire and Ice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember the guy on the cover with the wolf head?
Yeah.
Vaguely, yeah.
I saw that movie and I decided I'm playing that guy.
Okay.
So essentially, my character visually looked like that. I had a wolf helmet that I wore around everywhere, and I had 2 swords, and we were just all kids. Like, I think I was 12, 13, and the campaign gelled when like the GM decided we're going to go like throughout. He'd run various adventures. We were confronting this archlich in the Forest of Death, and he's like, you know, he goes like for several minutes explaining the Forest of Death to us, describing it. The trees ooze pitch, the ground is soaked in like, you know, decay and like flame, and you know, occasionally like bursts into flames, and you know, evil is everywhere and everything is dead. And like he goes on and on saying this several times. Finally, I'm like, wait a minute. So everything in there is dead? Yes, everything in there is dead, and the trees are all dead, and they ooze pitch and tar. Yes, and the ground oozes pitch and tar. Yes. All right, I'm going to start shooting flaming arrows into trees. And he's like, what? I'm like, I'm not going in there. You just said it's full of undead and disease and monsters and burnable things. I'm going to let nature take care of this problem. And he's like, what? I can't. And like, so I was like, yeah, I'm going to start throwing fireballs in there. Next thing he knows, his Forest of Death is on fire. We have set it on fire. We burned the Forest of Death to the ground. Killed everything. Like, only thing left was the Lich in his tower. His tower was on fire. And we're like watching his tower burn down, and we know he's going to come out because he's a Lich. He's not going to die that easy. But, you know, as he turns, he goes, I hate you. I'm like, well, you spent 12 minutes describing it. What am I supposed to do?
So this is the problem with gaming with smart people, is when you do stuff like that, they're going to do things like that in response.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, man. That's one of the things I love about RPGs to this day is when somebody does that. When they, like, you know, as much as it can be a pain. Like, I remember this dude who was in, like, my 3rd edition campaign who managed to tweak the psionics rules so he got, like, 17 attacks.
Oh, God.
We're all sitting around, like, waiting for him to resolve his many, many attack rolls, and it completely stopped the campaign dead. We're all like, okay, that's attack number 4. Here comes attack number 5. Okay, we're gonna be here a while. I'm gonna go get some soda. Yeah, that campaign, for all that it was, you know, it was a pretty bog standard D&D campaign. It was, you know, we were all kids, and we got to do stuff like that. Like when we managed to talk a dragon out of attacking a town by straight up buying it off.
Yep.
Like, we just killed another dragon, and his loot's like all sitting there. We can't transport it out anyway. You want it? Yes. What kind of question is that? Like, well, if you just go take the money, we can leave this town alone, right? They got nothing you want. They got some cows. What do you want cows for? I mean, you'll eat 1 or 2, but then, you know, that's just, you know, empty calories, really.
What about you, Tim?
Man, it's tough to say. I mean, there have been so many really great ones. I think the most recent ones that went really well, that I was very proud of, was 50 Fathoms. I know you know a little bit by reputation, but 50 Fathoms is one of the pinnacle settings, and in it takes place in a fantasy world that's slowly being drowned by water. There were these 3 witches, and they cast an evil curse upon the land in order to cause the water levels to rise. And so what's happened is that most of the world has been drowned under 50 fathoms of water, hence the title. We played it for about a little over a year. From starting characters up until the end, we made about, I would say, probably between 25 to 30 sessions of it, from 0 through 100 plus experience point characters, which in Savage Worlds you get an average of 2 to 3 experience points per session, so that's a lot. And it wound up being just one of the best, most epic experiences we've ever had. Every single character was interesting, everybody was involved, everybody had great contributions to what was going on. Everybody was excited to play. Everybody was completely involved. I got a chance to pull a couple of really cool techniques out of my hat that I never got a chance to use very often. Changing up scenes and doing flashback scenes and doing all sorts of other fun stuff. And it worked really, really well. It's still one of my favorites. My other favorite was Mastering Tabletop, which was a little bit shorter. But again, it's another of those the mega campaigns that Chaosium did, and it was such a blast. We had, in a true Cthulhu style, we had several player character deaths by the time it was over, but not as many as you'd think. So less than 100%.
Yeah, I think when we did Mastering Tabletop, I might have actually lived all the way to the end. I mean, I wasn't sane. I lived.
We had multiple people who survived and were still sane.
Wow.
We weren't I was not using the core rules. Again, we were using Savage Worlds. We were using the Realms of Cthulhu supplement. And it's a little bit more forgiving. And I ran it in slightly more pulpy style and pulpy fashion.
So it's more like Robert E. Howard.
A little bit more like Robert Howard, a little bit like Indiana Jones, a little bit of that globe-trotting kind of, you know, action-adventure kind of thing.
Yeah,
more of a serial style.
One of my favorite bits, this is actually from a Chaosium collection. They published... one of the things they published is a Robert E. Howard collection called Nameless Cults, and it's got in the back of it a round robin that both Lovecraft and Howard took part in. In the Lovecraft bit, Lovecraft, the main character ends up, his mind is translocated to like a far-off world, and he's trapped in an alien body, and it's all about the alienation and horror of his new monstrous form. Then, like, he hands it off to Howard, and Howard is like, then he goes insane with rage and kills all the aliens and becomes their king. It's like, because Howard's like, if that happened to me, man, I'm killing some guys.
Well, that's fair enough.
Some dude's gonna get punched.
It's like, that's, to my mind, one of the best ways to distill the difference between, like, the Robert E. Howard type stuff and the Lovecraft type stuff. They could have characters, like, you describe them on paper and it's exactly the same, but when you actually read it, like, Howard's is like, nope, gonna kill it.
Yep.
I don't care how big and unfathomable that thing is, I can find something to kill it with. Have we dropped a comment on it yet?
See, I still think the favorite campaign that I ever played in was an old Greyhawk campaign, actually, and I'm not sure how we got here, or I don't remember, actually, but there was 5 of us that wound up living long enough to become, like, level 30-ish at the time, and it was back in 2nd edition time.
So yeah, you were like gods.
We were basically like gods, and we wound up getting involved in, like, an interplanar conflict of some sort, like you do, and with this huge epic battle, and, like, we're killing each other, like, everybody's dying, like, wounds are bleeding out, and then the GM just looks at us and hits the magic reset button. And then immediately flows into day 1 of the very first campaign that we had been playing for almost 10 years at that point. Where same town, same everything just reset, and that was the walkaway point. Like, everything that happened over the course of that 10 years erased completely as a result of all of our actions, like, because of what we started and what we finished. And it was like, it seems like a weird thing to be happy about, but I didn't see it coming, and I'm notorious for spoiling things. Like, I'm notorious for seeing things coming, and I did not expect that. I did not expect a universal reset, and I just sat there and I gave him the slow clap, and I was like, all right, well done, you win, absolutely, you win, we're good. So yeah,
that's, man, when they can actually get you, it's good. I remember, like, Shadowrun had a similar experience. I'm not going to go because you have other questions asked, but yeah, that is good.
Oh, absolutely love it. But then let's talk about the social aspect of gaming a little bit here, just because it is kind of the thing that it is basically to do, at least for me. It's a place to get together with people, either new friends, old friends, spend time, enjoy an evening. In my case with Tim, it's hopefully a weekly thing where we all get together and shoot the shit and eat food and, roll dice and do wacky shit. So tell me about some of the friends you guys have made as a result of tabletop RPGs, or friends you've lost, or, things along those lines.
If it wasn't for role-playing games, I would have gotten married.
That's a big one.
It is a very big one. My wife and I actually met in a role-playing group in college. It was at Buffalo State College, and it was a group called the RGG, the Role Players Gamers Guild, and I met her on the first day I went into the meeting, and she was seeing someone else at the time, and things didn't work out for them, and they did work out for us, and we've been together, math hard, 17 years?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It feels like, 17 years it'll be. 18 years. 18 years it's been. Wow, it's been longer than I thought. Math is really hard for me today. It is Friday, so I'm not doing my math so terribly well. So I'm pretty much everybody else that I've been involved with, anybody who I consider to be my true friends, anybody that I'm involved with on a day-to-day basis, or the people that I rely on the most, they're all people that I've met through gaming. It's the hobby I've been involved with the longest. It's the one that I spend the most time in. And so everybody that I'm very close with comes from the gaming background, the hobby. If it wasn't for this, I don't know what my life would be like. I shudder to think.
Well, I mean, I can't say that I met my wife through gaming. I met my wife actually through blogging, of all things. But it's funny because the place we got married, the house we got married at, was Julia Martin and Eric Haddock's house, and I met them through gaming. I was actually in their game. I was in the game that Julia ran, and I was in the game that James ran. James was running another game around the same time, and they both met at Eric's house. So right there, that group, if it weren't for them, I probably wouldn't have had any place to get married. So, yeah, right there. It's just funny. I mean, I move around a lot. I've actually lived in a lot of places, and gaming is usually how I find people to hang out with. Mm-hmm. Like when I lived in Blacksburg. Blacksburg, I don't know if you guys know about Blacksburg, Virginia. That's got a pretty big gaming subgroup. Like, for instance, the game you're talking about.
The Blacksburg Technical Research Center.
Yeah. well, for instance, the gaming store that was near the place where I got my tattoos was actually run by Shane Lacey Hensley.
Yep.
And so I didn't know him very well, but I mean, I used to go in his store all the time, and he actually has a game store, and that's where I found out. It was right around the time that third edition was coming out. It was right around the time that I picked up third edition. I actually started playing that again because like I said, I moved into Blacksburg, and there was the gaming store. So it's usually been where I go to like find like people who are of like mind. Just generally speaking, people I can get along with. To a degree, online stuff has kind of replaced that for me, just because that's where my job is.
Sure.
But it's the same. It's still pretty much a big part of it. It's funny because I don't like it when the online stuff affects the pen and paper stuff too much. Like, one of my biggest problems with 4th edition was that it felt a little too much like WoW.
Yeah.
I didn't like that. But it's the same kind of people. Like, it's the same groups of people. The people playing them are generally the same, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. So yeah, it's funny because after my mom died, I was like 17, 18 years old when my mom died, and I ended up living for a while in the driveway of a dude who I was playing D&D with. Like, he let me crash at his house for a couple months while I was trying to find out where I was going to end up going. So yeah, it's actually done a lot for me over the years. It's funny too because my first publication is actually an in nomine adventure in Pyramid, just when Pyramid was first going online. This is like 94, 95.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I wrote that, and I wrote a mashup for them that basically took Aberrant and Mage and jammed them together. It was like, what if all the Aberrant stuff is just mages who are sick of Paradox and came up with an explanation people will buy? It's all comic books.
Love it.
So yeah, it's actually gotten me my publication. I don't think I would have written my books if not for gaming, because it's the kind of stuff that you think about when you play games. It's like, how do I get this to work? Oh, what if they were Atlanteans? Yeah, that'll work. So yeah, it really has kind of shaped my life. I hadn't really thought about that.
See, and I'm in the same boat too, because when I was a kid, I was that nerdy kid growing up in a not so nice neighborhood because my family was poor and we grew up at like just outside of the projects type area. Like, we were happy because we were able to buy a house like a block away from the projects. So I didn't have a whole lot of friends because I was that kid that always has nose buried in a book. I was always that kid that I didn't play sports really at a younger age. I didn't really interact well with other kids because I was always slightly higher intellectual levels than they were, just because of how much I read, and they didn't like it, so I used to get the shit kicked out of me all the time. Then when I started role-playing, like when I was 12-ish, I started meeting like-minded people. I started making friends, and I started interacting with people and learning how to interact with people. And it really kind of took me out of this shell of not knowing how to talk to somebody and kind of thrust me into the world, just because it was something that I really enjoyed with people that I enjoyed, and it put me at ease talking with folks. Some of the most important events in my life happened as a result of gaming. I have a place to live currently now. My lovely apartment house type place that I live in was a result of me coming over to game with friends, and then him going, hey, so I'm moving out, you should go talk to Lauren about moving in. And then I go, hey, you want somebody to rent? He's like, hell yeah. Okay. And so that was an important factor. I would never have gotten into writing if it wasn't for this, because like you said, like I may not have any publications, but my blogging was a direct result of me writing campaigns and writing like what I call pseudo source books, my little pamphlets and stuff like that for all my things. It was a natural extension. It was a natural progression to get into that, and it also keyed me up so like I can think about things analytically, like you said, because you start thinking about why do things work the way they do? How can they work? Let's explain it. Let's talk about it. And that's how I got into that sort of those aspects of it. Some of my best friends and some of my worst moments have been a result of gaming. I've lost friends over it, who I've actually seen some of their true colors and learned, wow, that person isn't actually as nice as I thought they were. Holy shit, they care a whole lot more about that character than they do about the person sitting next to them at the table. That's a problem. Like things like that. It's amazing how many life lessons I learned as a result directly of role-playing games.
Yeah, I actually I had a guy come across the table at me once over what happened to his character.
Oh, jeez.
I was like, dude, I'm sorry. You can re-roll one. I don't know what to tell you. You're the one that decided to take off all your gear and try and join the enemy because you were mad at somebody else at the table.
Jesus.
Like, weird stuff happens, but overall, it's been a positive in my life, I would say.
Absolutely. So, now let's go to the last big topic here that I think I have, and it's the age-old debate of roll versus roll. And it's one that I know that we've talked about in the past individually, but it's something I feel should be brought up. It's the idea of whether it's more important to roll dice or to invest yourself fully in your character. And I'd be interested for you all to share your thoughts with the world. Start with you, Matt.
Oh, okay. It really depends on the group and what they're into. I've done games where it was all just, hack and slash, roll the dice, min-maxing, and kill. An example of the other thing is, like, my first big Shadowrun game. We started off as a group, like, of just nobody in particular. Like, I was playing an adept, and my friend was a troll hacker, and we had, like, a rigger who was kind of, like, way too into her rigging, like, the devices. She thought they were, like, all, like, for pets. And we called ourselves the Junkyard Dogs, and we were pretty much the absolute... You came to us if nobody else would do the job. We can't get anybody better, so these guys will do it. And by the end of that campaign, we'd blown up Mount St. Helens, fought 2 immortal elves, tried to save the daughter of one of the 2 immortal elves, fought bug spirits, and that was like... There was a ton of role-playing in that one. That was almost all role-playing. Like, a lot of times stuff happened that shouldn't have, just because it was cool. Rather than with the game system did not support blowing up Mount St. Helens, just stuff like that.
What game system would? I mean, aside from Champions.
Yeah, lots of systems would, but heck, you can probably do it in D&D once you get around level 15. I'm pretty sure there's probably a spell that'll blow up Mount St. Helens.
If not, there probably will be one now.
Yeah, but I mean, it really does depend on, like, is the group having fun? That's really, to me, that's the rule. If the group is having fun mowing down everything, like, I tell this story every so often. This story is from a friend of mine. It's not really my story. It was from one of his games, but he was, like, running a game, and his friend was like, we got to go and destroy the worm. And he's like, you have to get really powerful to destroy the worm, right? You have to have a lot of enemies show up. And he goes, put them in front of me. Like, some people like it. They like, there's a reason that, computer games have games like Diablo and games like Baldur's Gate. There's
oh, yeah.
or Torment, for that matter, which is as close as you're ever going to get to a good Planescape video game, and it was a pretty good game. That kind of stuff, like, if people are enjoying it, then that's all that matters to me. I don't care. Like, I'll do whatever. I'll play in a crunchy game where all we care about is how well we're rolling, and I'll play in a game where I don't even look at my sheet. I think that the vampire game I played in, like, I don't even remember if I looked at my character. There was one time I was the guy who most wanted to roll dice in that campaign because everybody else was playing like a Ventru or a Toreador, and I was a Bruja. I'm sitting going, I got nothing to do most of the time. And finally, like, the last game we were running...
Just let me punch something.
The last game we were running, like, before we switched over, we were going to switch to a different game system. And this kid Stuart, who was running it, was like, okay, we go through various, like, political maneuverings, and finally, like, all of a sudden, the Sabbath shows up in force. Like, there's hundreds of them outside, and it's like, everyone's like, oh my god, what are we going to do? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? All those points I put in celerity, I'm going to use them? Oh my god, it's Christmas! It's violence Christmas! Like, I seriously went, like, I was like I had 2 baseball bats and I broke them in half so they'd have sharpened points. And I just waded through these guys. Everyone was like, what? We don't get to do anything. I'm like, I've had to sit around and watch you guys politically maneuver for 3 months. It's murder time! It's death Christmas! Stab. So, I can go either way, really. I guess I'm eye-rolly, or whatever you want to call it.
Tim?
It's funny. I fundamentally have a very negative reaction to this argument every time it comes up. Because, in my opinion, if you're not playing a game with rules, then you're not really playing a game. I mean, that's
exactly
what a game is. A game is structured make-believe. A role-playing game is, we're going to pretend we're doing something, but we're going to have very specific rules about what you can and can't do to make it fair for everybody involved, to make sure that everybody has a chance to do something, to make sure that nobody gets more of the spotlight than anyone else, and to make sure that the guy in charge isn't putting too much pressure on them. So I think it's a false dichotomy. I don't think there's a strong difference when you're talking about a role-playing game. I don't think any part of it's more important than another. That being said, yeah, totally I'm behind the concept of if the game flow is going well and everybody at the table agrees that the thing that should happen next is the thing that happens next, you can ignore the rules. There's nobody's going to knock down the door and say, you're not doing this officially, you can't do this right away, you're not going to get a letter from the league commissioner saying you're not following the rules, there's no deflate gate in D&D, that's not a thing. So, and so it's okay to be more loose and more relaxed about it, but there are certain situations where you really can't. Example, if you look at something like the Expeditions program that Wizards does, is that they need to keep things a little bit more tightly wrapped because they have to anticipate how that's going to affect other campaigns that may use those same characters. Same thing with tournament play or when you're doing game demos. Like if I'm running something for other game companies, I want to demonstrate what the rules are doing. So I may spend more time explaining and implementing the rules as written, just because, again, I'm supposed to be putting on a presentation about how the rules are supposed to work. So I'll be a little bit more strict in those environments. And usually more loosey-goosey and kind of, again, like Joe said, we usually get together just to eat some food and shoot the shit and get caught up on our week and relax a little bit. I don't really care so much about the rules then. As long as, like I said, everybody's having a good time, everything's fair, and everybody's having fun, and also still being challenged. Usually you see these kind of arguments come from people who want to just be able to say, well, I just killed the guy, and without having to actually try to kill the guy. And that's the thing that kind of bothers me. It's like, well, maybe you do and maybe you don't. Sometimes the best moments come from those unexpected dice rolls. I have one of the Cthulhu games I ran way back in the day. I ran the Shadows of Yog-Sothoth campaign. And spoiler alert for a 30-year-old role-playing session, at the end of Shadows of Yog-Sothoth, you get to see Cthulhu. Because that's the thing that happens. It's a Call of Cthulhu game. And my one buddy Dan was playing, and he had the worst dice luck ever. I'd ever seen anybody before or since. The guy took damage from a library. It was that bad. So what happened was that through the whole campaign, he couldn't roll worth anything. So we get to the last scene, and there's Cthulhu, and he's all in his glory. And I say, okay, everyone make your sanity checks. And then Cthulhu, you make a sanity check. If you fail, you lose a bunch of sanity. If you make it, you lose a little bit of sanity. So 2 of the players made their sanity checks, no problem. Dan, true to form, completely botched the roll. 95. No question about it. He's blown the roll. There's nothing we can do. So, okay, everybody roll your sand loss. So the one guy made it. He lost 3 points of sanity. Second guy lost maybe 4. Dan picks up his percentile dice, because it does percentile sanity damage, rolls it, and stares in shock at the item, at the result. I lean over the screen and look at it, and I said, is that a 1? He goes, yeah. He says, you just saw the great and mighty Cthulhu, the high priestess of his people, or high priest of his people, who's been here for millennia waiting for the stars to come right, and your reaction is, I thought he'd be bigger? Those are the kind of things that don't happen if you're not playing by the rules, or you don't pay attention to the rules. Those are the things that you miss out on, are those little surprises that the dice will sometimes hand to you, or that the rules will sometimes hand to you. In some ways, it can also backfire. I've also played in games where characters are completely destroyed and groked because the game master had too liberal of an interpretation of the rules, or too strict of an interpretation of the rules, and just wound up being not fun.
Yeah, I'll cop to being the game master who, if I think things are going to just destroy everybody, I'll fudge it a little.
Sure.
To keep them alive.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll tell the story of how I did that once, though, because it actually plays into both of those. My wife and I was running a game for my wife, my wife's friend, and my wife's friend's kid. And it was at a time where I got really into having like a drawable mat. The kind you can like draw little maps on it and whatever. Had one of those, so I was getting like really, I was in love with this thing. So I did this whole thing, this huge thing. I came up with the entire name of the adventure that I wrote was called the Cult of the Brain Eaters, and I came up with it entirely so there would be no illithids in it. But I wanted them to expect illithids, because I figured being afraid that at any moment your brain was going to get eaten would keep them on their toes. But they were way too low level to actually fight an illithid, and they knew it. They'd be destroyed if an illithid showed up. It would kill all three of them and then just eat their brains and go on with its day. So they were pretty afraid. But we're going through the whole thing, and at one point they capture a kobold. And I'm thinking, they capture the kobold, they pump it for information, and the kobold doesn't know anything. It's a kobold. It's just there because it's a dungeon. It's like I thought there'd be loot. So they decide, in a strange moment that I wasn't expecting, they decide not to kill the kobold. They're like, they just keep it. They're like, you come with us. There's some loot down this way. I'm like, wait, you're keeping the kobold?
That happens surprisingly frequently, doesn't it, Tim?
Oh, yeah, just a little bit. So people are like, "Aw, kobolds, aw, you should come with us. You look lonely."
So they got the kobold, and they're going through the adventure, and they confront the main villain, who's he's planning on, he's got this horrible eldritch abomination who he's milking and putting the milk into the city's milk supply, essentially, so it's being used in food and so forth. So everybody's eating cheese that's secretly got demon in it and so forth.
Oh,
as part of this long-term plan. And so they're gonna stop it. It wasn't just cheese. Just the point was, they're gonna stop it because no one wants that. Whatever.
I love a good cheese.
You should feel bad, Tim.
But they're getting destroyed.
The devil made me do it.
They're making attack rolls and they're rolling 2s. I mean, they're just they're getting destroyed. They're gonna die. And for some reason, I'm like, all right, the kobold takes up arms to assist you. And the kobold, apparently, the dice I picked for that kobold didn't know what any other number but 20 was. Because that kobold was getting critical hits like a fiend. I was like, what is he doing? Kobold lunges forward with his dagger. 20. Okay? And 20 again. You rolled a natural 20 twice? Alright, whatever. Damage roll. Roll a D4 for his dagger. 4. Do you know how to roll low? and thus began, right in front of them, I rolled all this stuff right in front of them, thus began the rampage of the assisting kobold, because he murdered people. They would, literally, one roll in 3 they could barely hit. He just, he picked up a battle axe at one point, and despite the -6 penalty he had using that battle axe, the natural 20s he was rolling like candy saw him through. At the end of that fight, the arch-villain had been killed by a kobold who was assisting. He wasn't even one of the party. And it was glorious. It was everyone was so excited that they'd spared the kobold, and he turned out to be the paragon of kobold kind.
See, but and that's a perfect example. And I agree with him. There's a false dichotomy, right? It's not. It shouldn't just be one versus the other, because both have their place. Both have their place in every game. And like you said, Matt, it should all be about fun. But if you adhere too far to one or the other, you don't get moments like that. You don't get moments where the party saves the goblin and decides to have him tag along as their cook, and then winds up catching them from being poisoned, or the kobold saves them from the arch enemy that they're going to face because he's the only one that can actually physically do anything because dice. Or
seriously, I was trying to kill them at this point. I was like, screw it, it'll be a TPK. Those are fun too sometimes. Everyone's a new character. But I'll let the kobold roll. What in the heck? The kobold just had a hot hand. I started letting other people roll for the kobold, but it didn't help. It's I switched dice at one point. I'm like, no, stop using that green die. Use that red die. Nope, still 20s. What?
But that's exactly it. Those fun moments, those stories that we get from those would not happen if you just said, if it wasn't a factor of both of those things being a thing, right?
Exactly.
And I think that's what a lot of people don't, when they bring up this topic, and every time somebody I talk to who isn't really into the role-playing scene brings it up and says, oh, is it just about rolling dice, or are you just going to go and pretend to be, Shakespeare? It's hard to tell them about that particular type of event, because that's what makes it so special. That's what makes it so much fun. Those random things. And I think that anybody who draws their line in the sand and says on one side of the camp or the other, those are the ones that are wrong. And I think that they should open themselves up to both sides and just say, you know what, I'm just going to have fun with it. It's not just about adhering to the rules. It's not just about adhering to a character. Is it cool? Is it fun? And I think that's the most important thing, at least to me.
I mean, at the point you were talking before, I mean, one of the reasons Call of Cthulhu is fun is because sometimes you like telling stories about how your entire party got eaten.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Like, one of the most fun I've ever had in a game was, like, the Stormbringer campaign, where I really should not have listened to that magic sword. It turned out it did not have my best interest at heart. You can take that, Demon Lord. Yes, I can. You don't actually work, do you? I work just fine. I just chose not to.
Play a D&D game where we've found a tomb that was completely, like, forgotten, that there was a sarcophagus really, really well detailed and hand chiseled to look like a humanoid warrior, and these jars of what appear to be very, very iron-tasting red wine, to which a player then poured over the sarcophagus because he was completely dry and did not believe in alcohol as a thing, resurrecting a ancient evil to terrorize the land, and was not expected or planned at all. It just kind of happened because, well, it was in the moment, and his character is like, well, I could drink this, or I'm actually a priest and I don't believe that, alcohol's a thing, so screw it. Well, he's dead. He can't really do any harm. Have some,
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, and then you just kickstarted the apocalypse by accident. Wasn't even planning on that happening. So it's like stuff like that. Like I love stories like that. But, yeah, I mean, that's basically all I have tonight. We've covered about as much as I think we could in a short period of time. All the different systems, our favorite campaigns, the social aspects of it, the false dichotomy of role versus role, and honestly, I want to finish it with one parting thought from you guys. If you are talking to somebody who's on the fence about playing these RPGs, who's on the fence, who walks into those gaming stores and sees that group and kind of doesn't know for sure if they should give it a shot or not, what would you tell that person? Matt?
Run. Run screaming. You'll be destroyed. No, do you like having fun? I mean, it's like you guys were talking before about how some games where you just sit around eating chips and bullshitting most of the time. Do you have something against having a reason to go do that? Because that's fun. You hang out with your friends and do wacky stuff. I remember like one of my friends used to do this thing where he would collect quotes from the game session, like things people said, and he would just, like, after the game was over, he'd just put it up somewhere online so we could go look at it. And it was just like, just remember, like, I remember the one time, like, during one of the games, my character got really mad at a paladin, and I said, "You have hat hair!" And, he was like, "Beg pardon?" Like, "You're not so perfect, your hair looks goofy. Your hair's all mashed up from your helmet. You have hat hair." And that's like, that's in the middle of a fight. We're, like, fighting a lich or something, and then I start to say that. It's like, stuff comes out. It's fun. It's a break from reality. It's... it's not really any different than going out to play poker, except in my opinion, it's a little bit more exciting. And meanwhile, there's some wacky stuff happening in my neighborhood. You guys hear that?
Something.
I thought it was like a child's toy or something of some sort. It was like, what do your cats get into now?
No, it sounds like the ice cream truck just went insane. Ice cream truck just failed its sanity check.
So there you go. Tim, what about you?
Go try it. There's no reason not to. It is easier than ever to get involved with role-playing games than it ever was before. I mean, like I was talking before, you've got the D&D Expeditions program, which is fantastic for new players. It's great for people who don't have a whole lot of time, who don't want to have a huge time investment, time and money. You can go to your local game store, which is always awesome, including our local great game store, Dragon Snack Games. And if you go check them out, and you go check them out on a Wednesday night, you'll be able to sit down, you'll be able to play for a couple hours. It's only a short time investment. You can try it out. Grab a free copy, download some of the test drive stuff, and give it a shot. Everybody started somewhere, and there's no reason, you just have to kind of get over the feeling of being slightly ridiculous about it. And once you make that little jump, you're going to have a blast. You're going to have a lot of fun.
Yep, and I'll finish it off by saying it is probably one of the best opportunities you will have in your life to enrich yourself in a way that you never expected that you possibly could, with potentially meeting good and new friends, learning life skills, and honestly just having a damn good time. You don't
didn't play all that Dungeons and Dragons without learning a little something about courage.
Exactly.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Also, if nothing else, you will learn not to take yourself so seriously, because I have lost count of the amount of times I totally came up with an incredible battle plan that was going to impress everybody, executed it, and rolled a 2.
Yep.
That dragon didn't even see me.
But absolutely, and I would like to thank both of you guys for joining me tonight for the discussion. Tell everybody where they can find you, or if you want to peddle your wares, now's the time to do it. Matt, start with you.
Oh, well, I mean, if you look, you can look for my stuff on Amazon. 2 books. One's called Bottled Demon, and the other's called At Last Atlantis. If you like role-playing games, they're pretty similar, actually. It's all what-if games, and as an example, the whole Atlantis thing is, what if Atlantis was in fact a dream that got birthed into creation, and Orichalcum is in fact solidified dream stuff. So it's stuff like that. It's pretty weird, but it's I like it.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the reads.
So, yeah, you can find me on Amazon. Otherwise, I write for Blizzard Watch. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm on Twitter, but quite frankly, my Twitter feed is really mostly just me going, "No, they did not actually make Johnny Depp as an idiot. Johnny Depp does not play a Native American. That's just insane." Disney did this. Disney. And Helena Bonham Carter's in this movie, but it's not. It's not a Tim Burton film? But how does that happen? How does Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham... Are they allowed to do movies without Tim Burton? Isn't that illegal? Like, my God. I'm still, like... And the guy from the Social Network is right. What is going on? So, yeah, that's my Twitter feed. So
Tim?
Yeah, I don't know how I can follow it up. I'm on Twitter at the Loremaster. I'm also on Facebook under my real name. I can also be reached at savagegmtim@gmail.com. I don't really have a whole lot to pimp other than the fact that I will be going to Gen Con this year. So I hope to run into some people there. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, or you want to know more about anything we've talked about today, feel free to drop me a line. I'll be happy to respond to anything as I get them. I'm going to be at Gen Con for a couple of days this year. I'm not on the schedule to run anything, but miracles can still happen. I also will be at our local Queen City Conquest in September. I'm going to be running a couple games up there, including some of the new stuff from Pinnacle. And I'll also be at Con on the Cob down in Ohio over the weekend. You can find out, or over the October weekend. You can find out more information about that at cononthecob.com. That's my buddy Andy Hop's convention. Always a great time. There's lots of artists and role players and board gamers and all sorts of other craziness. And we found out that there's going to be another big party. We're doing the big Savage Saturday Night Party is going to be happening again this year. That I know that Sean Patrick Fannin is going to be in presence. And if you really want to get involved with a really cool group of people and you want to come to one of the best conventions you'll ever be at, come on down. It's a great time.
And everybody knows where you can find me. If you don't by this point, why are you still watching my stuff? Seriously.
Who is this guy? Why can't I get away from him?
But yes, thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you hopefully within the next few weeks with the next episode. Until then, bye.
Bye. Goodbye.